a lot of situations, to be fair, where sometimes it makes sense to play a little dumb. We've all been there, right? A public job interview, though, is definitely not one of those situations. But that is exactly what we saw today at confirmation hearings for two of Donald Trump's nominees for very, very important government jobs. There was this guy, Jay Clayton, I just mentioned him. He is Donald Trump's pick to be the permanent replacement for Tulsi Gabbard as the Director of National Intelligence. And while his background may not include stints in national security, which is typically quite an important part of the qualifications, it does include a lot of advanced degrees, like a law degree from the University of Pennsylvania, a master's in economics from Cambridge. My point being, he is probably not an actual dummy. And honestly, even if he were a dummy, anyone up for confirmation to be DNI would expect he would be asked about this particular moment. We all remember this particular moment when Tulsi Gabbard stirred national outrage by showing up at the FBI raid of Fulton County, Georgia's elections office. And she was weirdly lurking behind pillars, too. But when Georgia's senator asked Jay Clayton about that moment, he decided to just play dumb.
Are you aware that Director Gabbard was present at the Fulton County raid in Georgia earlier this year?
You discussed that with me yesterday in your office.
Are you aware that Director Gabbard was present at the Fulton County raid earlier this year?
You brought it to me, my attention.
What is going on here? You've said at the beginning of this you have an obligation to be honest and forthright with the committee. I'm asking a very simple question. Are you aware that Director Gabbard was present at the Fulton County raid earlier this year? Yes or no? Are you aware?
I was.
You won't answer that question either.
I just said I was made aware of it by you yesterday.
The first time you learned that Director Gabbard was present at that raid was in my office yesterday?
It was the first time that, in my recollection, I've thought about it recently. Now, was I aware of it before?
What? Are you aware that former Director Gabbard testified that her presence at the raid was, quote, requested by the president?
I'm not aware of that until now.
If the White House Chief of Staff or the President asks you to travel somewhere across the United States and oversee the execution of a domestic search warrant on a sensitive election facility, will you do it? Is that appropriate? Is that appropriate for the Director of National Intelligence?
That's a hypothetical.
We all know it's not appropriate
Senator
for the
Ossoff, your
Director of
time has
National
expired.
Intelligence.
Sir, can I call you Jay? I mean, you know that you were there to testify for your own confirmation hearing to be the DNI, right? You're there of your own accord. Of course it's not appropriate. And it's also not a hypothetical. I mean, it literally happened 6 months ago, and we have the pictures to prove it. Everybody in this country has seen these pictures. We know Trump wants his DNI to act as the chief election conspiracy investigator and hunt for bogus evidence that he won the 2020 election. That's what he wants. But Jay Clayton, UPenn law degree graduate, wants to pretend he's just learning about all of this now. Like he just woke up from a coma, got offered a job, and then accepted it without reading up at all about what his predecessor was up to in the job, and not asking any questions about what that job would entail, including a confirmation hearing where you have to answer questions, apparently. And of course, he is just playing dumb here, because these are deeply uncomfortable topics to talk about. And I wish that was the only time that Jay Clayton decided to play dumb at his job interview today, but sadly, it was definitely not the only time. Now, before I show you this next clip, I want you to know that the job that Jay Clayton had before all of this was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and an office that handles some of the most high-profile prosecutions in this country. Like, for instance, the 2024 drug trafficking prosecution of former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was pardoned by Donald Trump last year.
Is it the case in the Juan Orlando Hernandez case that the President of the United States pardoned a man who had worked with the Sinaloa cartel to facilitate massive narco trafficking into the United States?
I don't remember the specifics of that case.
He was convicted in your district.
He was convicted.
Yeah.
We convict a lot of people for a lot of drugs.
Convicted of narco trafficking, yes?
I believe so.
No, so at massive scale, yes?
Well, you're telling me what I know. That's kind of, He was, I believe, look, I'll take your word for it. He was a convicted narco trafficker.
Did the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, pardon a convicted narco trafficker?
I believe we just discussed that. The President provided a pardon, yes.
Yes or no? Did the President of the United States pardon a convicted narco trafficker?
Yes.
I mean, I wanted to hide during parts of this hearing. Jay Clayton really wanted to pretend that he knew nothing about that Trump pardoned convicted drug trafficker by the very same office he now leads, which is also especially interesting given this is from a speech Jay Clayton gave less than a year ago while he was still working in that office and boasting about their accomplishments. Here's what it says, quote, "Some examples of our most recent efforts include the successful prosecution of the former president of Honduras and other high-level Honduran officials for narcotics trafficking." Right out of his mouth. Look, we all know the real reason for Jay Clayton's sudden bout of selective amnesia, you could call it. Donald Trump. He knows that if he wants to stay in Trump's good graces, he cannot risk saying anything that would make the super sensitive president remotely cranky. And so he's acting like a scared child who's afraid of making daddy mad. And he was not the only grown man, though, putting on that kind of performance today. Because just down the hall, literally, Trump's former personal attorney, Todd Blanche, was also interviewing for his job to be permanently confirmed as Attorney General, a job that is supposed to include a degree of independence from the president. But Todd Blanche wouldn't even pretend that the DOJ would be independent of the White House and outside of the president's grip.
Is the Department of Justice that you are running independent from the White House?
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive, is part of the executive. I mean, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the power of the executive to President Trump.
So the Department of Justice should be independent or not?
I think, as I said earlier, the Department of Justice is under the executive branch. If confirmed, I will be member of the president's cabinet. So absolutely, my obligation is the American people and the rule of law.
So we'll talk
but that
about
being said, I am a member of the cabinet of the president of the United States.
We'll talk about the if confirmed in a minute, but let me also point out the Department of Justice's own website states right on the homepage that what the department's core missions is independence and impartiality.
And that commitment to independence and partiality is not new. It's been at the center of the department's mission basically forever. But of course, Blanche has already demonstrated that he is anything but independent from Donald Trump's influence, which is a big part of why Trump wants him there. He's already been reprimanded by a judge for his role in helping Donald Trump effectively settle a lawsuit against his own government. You know, the backroom deal to create a slush fund for the president's allies and also grant Trump and his family broad immunity from IRS audits. Today, Senator Adam Schiff pressed Todd Blanche about that settlement, asking why the Justice Department chose not to defend itself against Trump's sham lawsuit, despite the many legal defenses that were available to them.
Who said that these defenses we're not going to accept, we're just going to go with the president's agreement in the slush fund, this immunity?
There was a lot of discussion internally.
But you made the decision.
What's the decision? What do you mean?
You made the decision to not defend the IRS and the Justice Department. You made the decision instead to sign this slush fund agreement.
We made the decision to settle the case, correct?
Yeah.
Now, it's clarifying, I guess you could say, to hear Todd Blanche sheepishly take responsibility for settling such a weak and frivolous lawsuit on terms so favorable to Trump. But that's the problem. Blanche won't defend the country's interest if it means saying no to Donald Trump. And it speaks to another telling moment from today's hearing when Todd Blanche accidentally said the quiet part out loud.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer.
I'm his lawyer. No, wait, hold on. I was his lawyer. Todd Blanche knows the reason that Trump chose his personal attorney to be his next attorney general. He knows that Trump wants Blanche to treat the Department of Justice like it's his own personal law firm, Trump's that is. And while Blanche may have corrected himself there, we know that Todd Blanche has never stopped thinking of himself as Trump's personal attorney, even when he started working at the Department of Justice. Just consider this moment from Todd Blanche's first confirmation hearing to be Deputy Attorney General just 1 month into Trump's second term.
Are you still Donald Trump's lawyer?
I mean, yes, my attorney-client relationship with President Trump remains. Yes.
People like Todd Blanche and Jay Clayton understand what Trump wants from them. And they seem very willing to embarrass themselves and sully their reputations and play dumb to give it to him to keep these jobs. Are these jobs so great? That's always my question. But the big question is really, what happens now? What happens from here? Joining me now is someone who I'm sure has a lot of thoughts on that, Senator Adam Schiff of California, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who is, of course, in that hearing with Todd Blanche today. So I just gave some highlights there. You were in the hearing pressing him today. What did you think of Todd Blanche's performance?
Well, I think the central question the senators had for him, he didn't answer very well, and that is, who do you represent? Do you represent the American people as the Attorney General is supposed to, or do you represent Donald Trump? Are you still his criminal defense lawyer? And he has made it very clear he is still the president's lawyer. He signs this settlement agreement, which a judge just said was basically collusion and a fraud and just a pretense of some kind of a court proceeding to give a patina of respectability to something absolutely devoid of that. He's made it clear that he will go after the president's enemies. He's made it clear that he believes the president has not only the right, but the duty to go after his adversaries and abuse the Justice Department to do it. So he has basically made it clear he is there to be an instrument of Donald Trump's will, to protect him, use the law as a shield to protect him, and also as a sword to go after his enemies.
The IRS settlement is one of the things that you pressed him on today. And again, I know everybody's been following this very closely. You just mentioned it too. But it's, of course, the IRS settlement that gives Trump, his family members, their companies, and affiliated individuals protection from audits, which is the key part here, part of the key part here. You also went back and forth with him about his inherent conflict of interest, of course, as a Trump lawyer directing one arm of the executive branch to settle with another arm. Do you feel anything was resolved there? I'm sure you have many remaining questions, but what are they at this point?
Well, one thing I'd like to know is who wrote this agreement? Who wrote this tax giveaway for the president? I asked Blanche about it. It's his name that signed it. He couldn't tell us who wrote it. Now, he said he assumed it was written by a Department of Justice lawyer or an IRS lawyer. But actually, when you look at the terms of it, it is so favorable to Donald Trump, you might surmise that it was actually written by his attorney, the person who is joined in filing the suit, the person who's now been referred to the Florida Bar Association by that judge in Miami for potential disciplinary proceedings. That judge also referred Todd Blanche to the New York bar. But we don't know who wrote this thing. We don't know why Todd Blanche was the only one who signed it. The agreement from the day before was signed also by someone from the IRS and someone else from the Justice Department. But this alone had Todd Blanche's signature. So he's taken full ownership of this at one level, and at another wants to deny any responsibility. I don't know who wrote this thing.
I know you've mentioned the referral to the New York bar, which is really interesting for people out there who are just tuning into this. What could happen next? Could anything happen next with his law license, or what should we expect?
Yes, New York could take his law license away, his ability to practice before the New York bar. It's one of the reasons why the Justice Department is trying to go after bar associations. They don't want anyone to be able to hold them to account. But when you take an oath before the bar, when you're sworn into the bar, you take an oath to practice law ethically, and judges can refer you to the Bar Association for an investigation when you don't. And here, the judge was very explicit in very harsh language you don't often see in saying that basically this lawsuit by Trump was fraudulent to begin with. It's notable that the president didn't file this lawsuit against the IRS when he was a private citizen. No, he waited until he became president again. And even though the statute of limitations had passed, the department didn't defend itself, didn't even assert the statute of limitations. That's how frivolous and false this sham of an agreement was. It was basically Trump agreeing with Trump not to assert any defenses against Trump's suit against Trump.
It is. It is quite a thing. Every time I talk about it, it still blows my mind because it's just so ludicrous it's happening. I know I was a little bit struck. I'm not naive. You always bring me back down to earth, too, when I get a little optimistic. But I was a little struck by Cornyn's questioning during the hearing. He pushed him a bit during the hearing. What are you hearing, if anything, from your Republican colleagues about Blanche's testimony today?
Well, look, I think they made it clear during the hearing, some of them, that they had concerns in particular about the tax, inside deal, the self-dealing instance between the president and the IRS and his lawyers. So there's been expressions of concern, but Jenna, I will say we've seen lots of expressions of concern by my Republican colleagues, not just on the committee, but off the committee as well. And those expressions of concern aren't always followed by actual votes that really hold the administration to account. Now, I hope this is the exception. I hope that the concerns that were expressed today, and Senator Cornyn brought up the fact that Blanche purported to kill the slush fund on his own. If this was truly a negotiation between two different parties, as they claim, one party can't simply renounce a deal that was given to the other party, unless, in fact, Blanche was on both sides of that deal, which is really what took place here. But Cornyn seemed troubled by it. He should be troubled by it. I hope that Tillis is troubled by it. I hope that Tillis is troubled by the fact that Blanche went before CPAC, this conservative convention, and bragged about firing all of the prosecutors and all the FBI agents that worked on any investigation involving his client, Donald Trump.
I hope they're concerned enough to actually vote where their concern is, but we will certainly see. We will not hold our breath here. I knew you were obviously in that hearing grilling Blanche, so you were not paying attention, or you were not consuming in the same way the hearing with Jay Clayton, but you're the former ranking member on the House Intel Committee. You've expressed concern in the past about Jay Clayton's lack of intelligence background for this role. One of the things that I think is interesting that some Democrats have raised is that Jay Clayton might be a better option than Pulte, given Pulte is clearly under the kind of eye or under the control of Trump and is clearly pushing his conspiracies. Where do you come down on that? And have you made a decision about where you're going to vote on Jay Clayton?
Well, look, what they do is they set the bar so low, like Pulte, this real estate guy, kind of a buffoon, really. They set the bar at Pulte. Isn't anyone better than Pulte? Shouldn't we just jump at Clayton because he's not Pulte? Clayton has very little experience. And as you saw today during the hearing, he couldn't even answer a basic question that would have required him to speak truth to power. He couldn't say who won the election because he knows Donald Trump doesn't want him to say that. If he can't say who won the election in 2020, how can we count on Jay Clayton to give it straight to the president, to Congress, when the intelligence might contradict what the president prefers? I mean, let's say there's intelligence that Iran is cheating on this deal, but the president doesn't want to believe it because he's telling the public something otherwise. We need the director of national intelligence to both level the president, say, sir, I'm sorry, but we have strong intelligence the Iranians are cheating. Here's what it looks like. Here's our degree of confidence in it. We need them to brief Congress this way. And what we saw with Tulsi Gabbard is a willingness to manipulate the intelligence, to basically tell an intelligence council, no, I don't like that conclusion, rewrite it, and fire people who won't. That is the worst thing you could ask for in a director of intelligence.
My next guest has been speaking to very big crowds across the Midwest the past few days, and he's been talking a lot about what Democrats need to do once Donald Trump is gone from the political scene. That day will come, everyone. Pete Buttigieg is standing by, and he joins us next. Candidates right now, and that may not sound that surprising. We're pretty close to the midterm elections, but he's doing something I think is really interesting. He's really focusing his time right now in red states and districts where the Democratic Party has not won in some time, because he believes Democrats can, of course, win in those places this November. And one of those states is Nebraska, where Buttigieg rallied today in a House district that Democrats are looking to flip. Another one where he was this weekend is Iowa, where Buttigieg spoke just over the last couple of days. And he pointed out in that speech that the abstract and sometimes academic way that some Democrats approach politics muddies what should be the party's message, that Trump's attacks on democracy are viscerally hurting people.
250 years ago this month, our founders didn't go to war to overthrow a king because they read John Locke and Rousseau in their studies and thought it would be neat to go try this stuff out someplace. They put their lives on the line to create something new in this world because they thought it would make everyday life better if the people were in charge of the government instead of the other way around. 9 out of 10 House races drawn so that you know who's going to win before the first vote is cast in a 50-50 country. This is not an academic concern. This hurts us. This is why things aren't working properly. This is how they can make you pay more at the pump for a war you never asked for. How they burn down the Department of Education while we're worried about kids who can't do math or read like they're supposed to. This is why we can't have nice things. But it doesn't have to be this way. And that's what we're here to do something about.
Joining me now is former Transportation Secretary and former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. It's great to see you. You've had quite a good time, it seems like. We just showed a clip out of the campaign trail over the last several days. It's interesting to me, and I just mentioned this. I mean, I know you were a sought-after surrogate on the campaign trail. You probably get lots of calls from people to ask you to campaign. You've made a decision as of late to really focus your time in red states. Why?
Well, I think it's important that we reach out everywhere at this moment when more and more people, including independents and a lot of people who usually vote Republican, are ready for something different. You know, sometimes I think we've been made to feel like we who are opposed to what's going on right now in Washington and in Congress are the minority. We not only have a majority, we have a supermajority in public opinion when it comes to the Iran war, when it comes to the prices being too high, when it comes to the need for the wealthiest people and corporations to pay their fair share, on and on down the list, healthcare, you name it. But having a majority in public opinion doesn't automatically mean you get a majority in Congress. You got to go out there and work for it. And what I have found in places like Nebraska's 2nd District, where I was today, like Iowa, where I was yesterday, other places I've been campaigning, from Marjorie Taylor Greene's district in Northwest Georgia to the work we were doing in Montana to heading out to Florida in a little while. There are so many people who, if we can get in front of them with that message, I think they're going to respond and are going to insist on change, deliver change. And it's a reminder also that you don't have to wait till the next presidential election to do something. We have a lot of elections right now in front of us in 2026. We got to make sure that they go well.
Part of the argument you've made, and I was reading your speech this morning from Iowa, and obviously I've seen a lot of the clips, is that it's important to kind of, and people just heard you say this too, invite people who voted for Trump in the past into the Democratic coalition. And that makes sense. I mean, more voters means you win elections. That's kind of how the whole thing works. But how do you do that? Because right now, as you well know, there are so many people out there who are part of the Democratic coalition, who have long been, who feel like their voices aren't heard. Nobody's speaking to them. Nobody's speaking out for them, who feel alienated and that their very existence is under threat. So how do you do that? Well, not alienating those groups of people who Democrats also need to vote for them.
Well, that's why it's so important to point to all of these things where we have this in common, where it's not about triangulating some ideological middle. It's about finding that most Americans, the left, the center, and quite a few people who usually vote more right, are going to agree right now on health care, on all of the corruption that's going on right now, but only if we do the work. And, I don't think there's any contradiction between standing firm in our values and being there for people who have been part of our coalition for many years and many generations, and inviting people to come join that coalition and grow it. The most effective Democratic candidates and presidents in my lifetime did that. I think back to how it felt in supposedly deep red Indiana, the night that state turned blue in 2008, as Barack Obama both consolidated that Democratic coalition and invited a lot of people who usually voted the other way to cross over. We have a moment like that on our hands because there's so many people who, frankly, believed the presidents that the promises that the president made. Far too many voters were told by this president, I'm going to lower prices. We're told I'm going to keep us out of these dumb wars. And rather than being hostile to them as voters, I think we have a chance now to invite them in because they're asking a lot of questions about how things ever got to this point.
In your speech today, you reiterated how Democrats can continue doing politics as usual, which I think the majority of people watching it was like, yeah, they can't keep doing it because it's not working, and we all see the polling numbers. What do you mean by that exactly? What specific things do you think Democrats should avoid repeating or continuing to do?
Well, I think we've got to recognize that many of the institutions that are being destroyed right now by the Trump administration also cannot and should not be put back together just the way they looked in 2021 or 2012. I do think there is a risk that we might imagine that our job is to take power and just put everything back the way it was. But that's not going to work either. If our economic and political and social systems were working just fine, we wouldn't be here. So the old status quo can't be the answer. We've got to have new answers, and we've got to take big swings at major political reform. Again, I think there's a moment here, for example, on money in politics. You don't have to be a Democrat and you don't have to be in a blue state to be part of the majority that wants to change that, including, if necessary, a constitutional amendment to deal with Citizens United. And part of the message that I had in Iowa and that I'm taking everywhere I go is our economic problems are related to the problems in our political system. You know, there is a conventional wisdom out there among some political strategists saying, don't talk about what's wrong with our democracy because we should only be talking about the kitchen table. To me, those two things are intimately connected. The reason we are paying more at the pump, the reason our mortgages are unaffordable in this country is directly related to the fact that there is no accountability in our government, and there won't be until we fix Congress, fix the Supreme Court, fix money in politics, and we absolutely cannot be afraid to talk about those big reforms as well as the ins and outs of healthcare, education, the things we want to do on day one.
Accountability, you hear that word a lot. I hear it a lot. I'm sure you hear it a lot. People really want it, right? What does that look like as we look ahead? Because there's not unlimited hours in the day. There's not unlimited time in Congress. What do you think accountability looks like as we look ahead?
Well, when given the chance, Congress has to, a Democratic-led Congress, has to establish accountability, first of all, around the just naked corruption that is going on. This is not a political question. The idea that the American people shouldn't have been spending hundreds of millions of dollars of our taxes on retrofitting a secondhand jumbo jet. The idea that there is something highly questionable about people from the President of the United States to a lot of other officials getting rich on stock trades while making decisions that move markets. Dealing with that is not some kind of partisan conquest. That's something that most Americans can actually come together around. But also there's the day-to-day accountability that our democratic system is supposed to deliver. See, this is part of the problem with gerrymandering. If 9 out of 10 House districts are ones where you know who's going to win before the first vote is cast, then members of Congress don't feel a level of accountability. They don't feel responsible for anything from big policy questions like standing up to this Iran war, which is supposed to be Congress's job to declare or to stop, or their personal conduct like trading stocks and getting rich when no member of Congress should be trading stocks in the first place.
One of the other things I think that has been really interesting about the speeches you've given is that they're very forward-looking. You talk about kind of the period post-Trump or where we go from here, which is so important for people to think about. And you said this thing, and having worked in government a lot myself, I very much related to this in a recent interview where you said that serving in the Biden administration radicalized you, that just seeing how hard it was to get even common sense things done, like delivering a new bridge or airport, changed you. Obviously, you were the transportation secretary, so it's understandable that those were the examples you gave. But just like bigger pictures here, what does solving that problem look like if Democrats win back power and eventually the White House? Because you already referenced, like, you can't rebuild things and put them exactly back together. What does that look like when you're thinking big about how to go from here?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is if you have a common sense view that you share with most Americans, it will take radical change to actually act on it in today's Washington. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not talking about ideology. I'm saying that in order to get anywhere, even as an ideological moderate, you have to be ready for radical change in our institutions. What does that look like? Some of the changes I was just talking about around money and politics, around Congress and how elections work, certainly making sure that we have the voting rights reform and protections that are doubly important because of what has been done to systematically tear down black political representation in order to try to keep this Republican Congress in power. But look, we've also got to recognize there are certain institutions that we have cherished as Democrats that are important institutions that probably can't and shouldn't go back to the old way. It was criminally wrong to basically gut the Department of Education as they have done. I also don't think our project is to make the Department of Education look just the way it looked the minute before Donald Trump got here. I could say the same thing about foreign aid. Again, criminally wrong to have demolished the U.S. Agency for International Development. That doesn't mean that we should put it back just the way it was. I know a lot of mayors who would love to see dramatic change in how housing and urban development works and how federal dollars can or can't be used to help make housing more affordable in cities. We should be listening to them, thinking about how we build things from the ground up, because there will be a moment when we have that clean sheet, that fresh start. I hate how we got here. We got here because of all of the destruction that's going on in this moment. But it's also a chance to build something new on sometimes the rubble of these institutions that were frankly already rickety, already showing their age years before we got to this moment.
If you ask most people who have worked in Democrat administrations, they would say things were too bureaucratic, too. It's just that, and too bloated, too. It's just how you do it. We don't have nearly enough conversations about the path forward, so you have agreed to stick around. I'm very grateful for that. We're going to take a quick break. We have more questions. We'll be right back.
I'll just say this hurt a whole family. This didn't just hurt me. And whatever you think about me, my politics, you just leave my children out of it. They're 4 years old. They do not deserve to be affected or impacted. They shouldn't have to know the first thing about any of this. And there are plenty of things that are acceptable, that are fair game, including really tough arguments, tough rhetoric, whatever. But you don't bring somebody's kids into this. And I don't know what else to say. Well, the other thing I'll say, it was not the easiest decision to go public about this and talk about what happened, but we thought it was important. And as soon as we did, we heard from so many people around the country, people we know and have worked with, people we don't know, some people that I have campaigned against. And I would like to believe that shows that for most people, there is a line, there is a boundary, and that most people are hungry for a different, better public life in this country. That whatever disagreements we're always going to have about taxes or healthcare or whatever, that certain things we can agree on about what we want life, including public life, to be like, because this kind of thing cannot be the cost of committing to public service or public life in America.
I've heard you say about this that it makes you both want to kind of run straight to your family, and also makes you want to make the world better for them, which is incredibly powerful. You've also talked about how your kids are too young. They're only 4 years old. Mine are a little older, but they're too young to know what happened and why. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've thought about this, and I'm sure Chasten has, with the internet and the media. They're gonna find out one day, and maybe sooner than you'd like. Have you thought about how you're going to talk to them about it? And I hate that this is a question that you even have to think about.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't know exactly what impact the experience will have had on them, how much they're going to remember of it. But I try to remember also that they will grow up and read about all this, hear about all this, and learn about all this. The best we can do is both to prepare them for the world as it is, that they are growing up and growing into, but also change it. It's not too late to be at work changing the way things work in this country. Not that I can fix it all by the time they're 15 or by the time they're 50, but we got to be working on that day in, day out. And I'm so sure that it doesn't have to be this way, and that they can inherit a way of doing things in this country that's better than what we're putting up with right now.
I always tell new working parents that part of the story of their kids is their own efforts to make the world a better place. That's part of the story of your kids, too, as hard as this stuff is. I have to ask you before you go, I know you recently told a reporter, I laughed at the answer to this in Iowa, that you're not rolling out a run for president in 2028. I think you were asked the question and you said, nope. It was pretty simple. I know you're not going to announce anything tonight. I know you're focused on 2026, but you've thought so much about the future. I'm just curious if you've thought about what qualities and what vision you think the next nominee needs to have. It's a different time even than when you ran and others ran.
You know, years ago, after my presidential campaign, we started an organization called Win the Era, and that organization's still going. And the reason that we called it that is, you know, every time I'm involved in an election, I care deeply about winning the election, just like I care about winning the elections in Iowa and Nebraska that I was involved with the last couple of days. But you need to win an election in order to secure an era, in order to make things better for that long haul. And I think that we need that kind of thinking right now. I think 250th is a great opportunity to step back and actually think about what it's going to be like by the time of the 300th. I know that might sound a little crazy, but you know, certainly expect that my children will be celebrating the 300th. With some luck, I might be there to see it too. And we're going to ask ourselves what we've done between this moment and that moment, so that by then, the sort of corruption that's going on right now is unthinkable. So that by then, the idea that people would be choosing between health insurance payments and mortgage payments seems barbaric. It is barbaric, but it will seem barbaric and antique by then. And for all of that, I think we need leadership. And I'm not just talking about the next president, but the leaders that we're going to elect right now in 2026 who can think about that long term.
We've been talking a lot tonight about a world after Donald Trump and what that might look like. And my next guest literally wrote the book on that topic. It just came out. Joining me now is political commentator Brian Tyler Cohen. He's the author of the new book, The Day After: How to Wield Power in a Post-Trump World. And you probably follow him on YouTube because millions of people do. It's so great to see you.
So good to see you, too.
Let me ask you, okay, in your book, we've been talking about this through the course of the show, and a lot of what Pete Buttigieg was just saying is similar to kind of the thematics, and it's so important to think about where we go next. So in your book, you write, the political truth is this: Democrats like to signal their virtues while Republicans like to swagger their virility. Democrats quaintly believe that being good is good enough to win elections. Republicans, on the other hand, think that Americans will admire them for looking strong, for wielding power, for extracting personal wealth from public well-being. There is a lot in there. Talk about how Democrats should change that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is Democrats, it feels like when Democrats get into office, they are there to protect the institutions of government, as opposed to using those institutions to deliver on outcomes for people. And we have seen the extent to which Donald Trump will barrel through anything: norms, traditions, processes, anything to get what he wants. The difference is he does it for self-enrichment. He does it for vanity projects. He does it to consolidate more influence on his family. What I argue in this book is that Democrats need to take that mentality, but to deliver for people on climate change, on health care, on voting rights, on raising the minimum wage, on expanding the Supreme Court. You name it. We need to barrel ahead through these institutions, through these processes, through these norms to get what we want.
Your book, as I've noted here, is really about wielding power in this post-Trump world. And obviously Trump will still be president if Democrats win back the House and maybe the Senate. We will see. What does that look like? You have to pick a priority or priorities. You can't do everything. What do you think they should pick?
Well, I think if we're not talking about a post-Trump world, if we're talking about the immediate future, and I do believe that Democrats will take the House, I'm also actually bullish on the Senate. But I think immediately what we'll be able to do with our positions of power in Congress is start to investigate some of the corruption that we're seeing right now, the rampant corruption. I mean, we are seeing a president who has made money hand over fist, billions of dollars, not just for himself, but his family, which, if I remember correctly, used to be something that was disqualifying for Republicans, and yet not a peep from the GOP, as we see Don Jr. and Eric and Jared Kushner gain billions and billions of dollars. We've watched this president trade favors, trade tariff favors, instead for foreign real estate and breaks on some of the legislation that he's putting forward. So this corruption is so blatant, so shameless, and so rampant that I think we would be well served, and I think the American people would agree, to look into a lot of what's happening right now, if for nothing else than to set the stage for what a Democratic DOJ can look into when they take power.
We only have about 30 seconds left, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you for some advice for everybody watching out there who are trying to communicate their ideas with the public and doing it not ineffectively and maybe in a cringy way, because you are very effective at communicating with a broad audience. What's one tip out there for people who are trying to talk to the public and are trying to figure out how?
Talk in a way that people understand. Here's the easiest example that I have. I'll talk to politicians sometimes for interviews, and then we'll wrap the interview, and then they'll say something funny or normal or cool, and I'll be like, that's what I needed during the interview. So I think if people can talk to their constituents, talk to their potential voters like normal human beings, that would go a long way.
Thanks for watching The Briefing Weekend. Be sure to join us every Tuesday to Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern for The Briefing with Jen Psaki, right here on MS Now.